Welcome to Grab Your Gear. I am Joe, and if I sound a little different, it's because I have a cold. Meanwhile, here's Jack Windsor. Jack, of course, from the Windsor Report, here every week now on Grab Your Gear as a co-host. Big deal.
It's an honor to be here. Thanks for choosing me.
Well, brought you here because you answer questions and you don't beat around the bush, and we enjoy talking to you. Jack,
Likewise.
Of course, also has a radio show on 98.9, The Answer in Columbus, Ohio. You can catch that. It's also a podcast wherever you want to go, and that is the Windsor Report, I believe.
Yes, Spotify, you can search it up there, 98.9 FM, The Answer. All the backlogged shows are there for you to listen to.
And of course, the Ohio Press Network, which we do a lot of work with in conjunction with you because unlike a lot of outlets, Jack's still actually a journalist. He actually goes out and covers stories. Biggest story still 2 weeks later is kind of the election, the aftermath. I want to ask you a little bit about it. Sure. Was paging through the Wall Street Journal, and this caught my eye, the headline of an editorial, 4 more years of Trump may make America normal again. We had a cultural shift in the election, in my opinion. What do you think? I mean, they're talking, we went from this Hitler, criminal, convicted felon, all of that, all of a sudden now to the emperor walks into Madison Square Garden and is awarded the, the belt by the conqueror. And I mean, it's almost become, and the dance craves. What's going on? Because it feels like it's not only a political but a cultural shift, and it all happened in about 2 weeks.
Well, the first thing I'll say, you mentioned the belt. If you watch that fight with John Bones Jones, here's a black man, and Christianity is supposed to be this thing that's carried around by white Christian nationalists, and the first thing he did was praise Jesus. And the second thing he did was go give his belt to Donald Trump and thank Trump and did the Trump dance. And by the way, that happened in I think 3 separate NFL football games.
More than that. I saw clips where it was all over the place.
All over the place. So, there are a couple of things going on here. Number one, I think the public started to knuckle under the pressure and the fear that is this Marxist movement that's represented by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
Some people call it woke, just to be, I mean, it's kind
woke,
of,
Marxism, call it whatever you want. I think people started to knuckle under it because they felt like they looked at Donald Trump and went, now here's a guy who, before he ran to become president, was sought after by the liberals. They wanted him on their TV programs. They loved him. They took his money for their campaign contributions. But as soon as he put an R by his name, the machine started against him. And I think the average American went, if it can happen to that guy, I'm screwed. And so this election, to me, the reason I think we're getting back to normalcy is that it gave people who thought what they already thought, which was this is batshit crazy, to actually live that out now and go, okay, I wasn't crazy. What they were doing was completely out of bounds, and I've been on this guy's team, but now that he won, I can kind of come forward and do my dance. I think that's what this is about. We are unburdened by what has been.
It also, to me, maybe I'm not as philosophical as you. I think it's just the middle finger to everybody else. It just seems like I'm tired of political correctness. I'm tired of this, diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm tired of my neighbors who are crazy and have 36 lawn signs out. I want to go back to normal, and I think that's what's reflective here. And when you think about people that we built this podcast for, people who get up and go to work every day, the last thing I want to deal with was that crap.
100%. And as the parent of 3 school-aged children, the last thing that you want to have to deal with, in addition to trying to pay the bills, in addition to worrying about what the future looks like, is what are Johnny and Susie being taught at school? And is Johnny being called Joan? And is Susie being called Steve by some activist teacher? I mean, that's the world that we were living in. And to some extent, it's still the world that we're living in. But I think the cavalry has shown up on the battlefield.
A couple of things I'd noticed too, kind of in my notes, I was looking at this thinking, in the cultural shift, there's a freedom among people now to speak a little bit and say, I always thought this stuff was weird. They tried to cancel this guy, couldn't be canceled. Now you have the media, what is left of it, trying to recover, right? So you have this, the country, it seems like they're going, thankfully, I have a breath, I knew that was weird the whole time, I just feel like I couldn't talk. Then you have this element of the media still clinging to relevance, and I mean the national media and local media.
Yeah.
And so you have these appointments coming up, and you if you just watched a clip or two of some of these more mainstream cable outlets and news. They're outraged by these picks. And the biggest one, of course, is Matt Gaetz for Attorney General. And I was listening to Walter Kern says, people are confused as to why Trump picked Matt Gaetz for Attorney General. He goes, I think it's quite simple, because he could. And he's putting in a group of people, it appears, that he wants to turn government upside down and get it back to the people, because who do you work for, right? I think he's a customer service guy, right? And he's saying, we're shifting this. We work for the people. I mean, am I on the right track there, do you think?
I think you're totally on the right track. And you know, there's a part of me that I would be insincere if I didn't say this from the get-go. When I hear members of the press and of the opposing party criticize Trump's appointment for Secretary of State or Department of Defense, I want to go, talk to me about Rachel Levine.
Yeah.
You have a director, a man who's pretending to be a woman, who wrote email messages in the past that clearly stated, hey, the reason that we're going to go down this path is that there's money in it. So you have a party that was willing to sacrifice our kids at the altar of big pharma and the medical industrial complex profit. It's ridiculous. And so, you know, part of me wants to go, to your point earlier, and you know, I don't care. If Matt Gaetz did something illegal, then, you know, then prosecute him. Otherwise, shut the hell up. He's going to do a job, and the other people in those departments are going to do a job. And who are you, you know, writer who got it wrong on COVID, writer who got it wrong on Trump, to act as if you know what that person is going to do the first 2 years or 4 years?
It does have a little feel when he walks into arenas and things and has his posse that it's like the Avengers are here.
It's something, isn't it?
And I think they're doing that on purpose.
I do
okay.
too.
Couple of things happen as a byproduct of the election, and that is when people when they win office or they take a cabinet position, seats open up. One of the big ones is in Ohio, and of course that's the seat to replace Vice President JD Vance. I saw that there were a number of news outlets copying your work, which they didn't credit you for, which
Surprise, surprise.
journalism, you're supposed to, if you take somebody's information, you're supposed to write like according to. And of course the theft was taken. I think Fox News stole your story, didn't they?
Fox News originally broke it, and then after Fox, I think PJ Media and the New York Post followed suit based on the Fox story. But Fox broke their story literally hours after we released the video that said, oh, by the way, there's this dark horse candidate that Governor Mike DeWine will be meeting with.
So you put your video out, talk about the dark horse, and miraculously Fox does investigative work. So Fox really should learn the word attribution. Okay, so you were a couple of days really ahead of the story because you told me about that a little earlier. Yeah. Explain what we're talking about, who's in the running, and then I'd like to know what you think is going to happen. Because it's a pretty important seat.
Massively important seat.
Because you just, it's like Mike DeWine is a governor who's known to, a lot of people call him, you know, Republican in name only for certain policies. A real staunch party loyalist. Other people think of him as an obstacle. Whatever you think of him, he's going to make that, you know, he's going to put that Senate seat, he's going to fill it. So who's he going to fill it with, Jack?
I think the answer to that question is known by Mike DeWine and First Lady Fran DeWine only. But if you read the tea leaves, there are a couple of candidates that matter. The story that we broke, the dark horse candidate, is a Trump surrogate and trusted attorney, Mehek Cook.
Sharp lady, very smart.
Very smart, has been out in front on behalf of Trump, Bernie Moreno, this entire election cycle, has a tremendous media presence. Frankly, I've worked with her behind the scenes before on certain projects, has an energy that I've never seen matched. She is constantly saying, I will get this done. And she's one of the few people, when she says she's going to get something done, gets something done. But interestingly enough, it didn't come from her. There was some scuttlebutt about, because, and let me just push pause on that for a minute. What's interesting, you mentioned Mike DeWine. Mike DeWine is a Republican, but it appears Mike DeWine is really concerned about making an identity politics appointment. He's concerned about, can I put the first Ohio woman in that U.S. Senate seat? Whether it's right or wrong, it's just an interesting observation. And so the person that originally, you know, took up that discussion space was Jane Timken, who is the former Ohio Republican Party chairwoman, current chairwoman to the Republican National Committee from the Buckeye State.
Has she ever held an office?
Never held an office, ran for U.S. Senate in 2022. And therein was the point when someone reached out to me and said, listen, someone in Governor DeWine's close circle really likes Musck Cook. And I kind of went, well, wait a minute, has she won election? And can she raise money? And then I thought, well, Jane Timken hasn't won election, but Jane Timken has a storied track record of raising money. Jane Timken is also someone that that Donald Trump handpicked back in the day to lead the Ohio Republican Party at one point. So there is a good relationship there. But Musck is the dark horse candidate. To answer your question, there are 4 keys that the governor's going to consider. Number 1, this appointee has to play well in the White House. Number 2, they have to be able to win a special election in 26 and then turn around 2 years later and win that seat when it's termed out in 2028. Number 3, they have to be willing to stay there and do the hard work. And I think Governor Mike DeWine, a former U.S. Senator, loves the Senate so much. He wants to put someone in that seat that he believes is going to be there and earn tenure. And then number 4, that person either has to have a cash stash or be able to fundraise. So when you look at all of those things, certainly a Musck Cook and a Jane Timken are in the mix, but you have to also look at some other key people. And I think Frank LaRose is one of those who's won statewide office, has the ability to raise
And
some
he is
funds.
the Secretary of State, right?
Secretary of State. I think Robert Sprague is someone that he's won statewide. He apparently has a pile of cash and certainly can raise.
And he is the State Treasurer.
State Treasurer. And then, of course, you have Jane Timken, who really spent her life as a fundraiser when you're chairwoman of the Ohio Republican Party. One name, I'll break it here, that has been thrown into the mix is Cleveland gazillionaire and all-around good guy, Michael Gibbons, who ran for the U.S. Senate in 18
Yes,
and again in 22. In fact, in 22, some polls had him leading before Donald Trump weighed in and endorsed JD Vance. My understanding is that he is in the mix. But I will note this. Even if you have a pile of cash, look at what just happened in this race between Bernie Moreno and Sherrod Brown. I think it absorbed about $500 million. So I don't care how much money you have, you also have to be able to fundraise.
One of the most expensive Senate races
ever.
Yeah. Pennsylvania, I think, was more expensive, but Ohio was right behind it. When do you think we'll know? When does it have to be done?
Well, it all comes down to when does JD Vance make his resignation date effective. I've reached out to his camp. I didn't get any clarity on that. I think that they are going to want to know that pretty darn quickly, and I think we'll know probably right after Thanksgiving.
Okay. So the one, I didn't put this in our rundown, but we also have the Senate situation in Pennsylvania. I actually looked, I caught a little bit of the news where they had a political columnist from, I think, Pittsburgh or that area, where she said, well, the one thing Democrats do well is find votes. And so I guess we're going through that. The courts have stepped in and said, you have to only count the votes that you can count. And then, of course, there's scuttlebutt that people go, I'm going to count whatever vote I want. I mean, I'm paraphrasing. But it is a little bit of a mess there.
It is a mess, and it scares me the same reason that conflating data points during COVID scared me. At some point, you could never really determine who died from COVID and who died with COVID. It was all meshed together. Same thing. Are these real votes or are these manufactured votes that were trucked in the 11th hour? And, frankly, that is an injustice. That is, you want to talk about disenfranchising voters. If I'm a voter in Pennsylvania and I have voted and I dotted my I's and crossed my T's and did the things that I needed to do to make sure that my vote counted, and I see people sitting there counting votes, I'd be filing a lawsuit.
Their governor,
yesterday.
Josh Shapiro, a Democrat, has chimed in and said, we need to follow the law.
Yeah.
So I even think John Fetterman kind of said it. So when you have John Fetterman, the voice of reason, you're in trouble. One thing with this election I wanted to ask you about was the potential for less regulation in our lives.
Yep.
It could be a bump for merit shop workers, people that are the non-organized labor crowd when it comes to construction and trades and things like that. Mm-hmm. You did the documentary Union Hustle. You were hosting that. And there was this thing called the Project Labor Agreement, which basically is a device that ensures that unions have first priority on those projects. And if you want to know more about it, just watch that series. But I'm wondering if things like that start to go by the wayside, because not only is that it's discriminatory towards 80% of the workforce,
it
because
is.
they don't have access to a job. But it's also, when I think of Vivek Ramaswamy and I think of Elon Musk, those devices add about 20% of the cost of projects. And it's like, talk about low-hanging fruit for guys like that go, hey, no, we're going to make it for all the workers, you know, that can work. But we're also not going to screw the taxpayer anymore. And that is a big device. That's something that organized labor depends on.
It is.
You think we're going to see the end of things like this?
I think we need to see the end of things like this. It is a 20 to 30% tax from Jump Street, and that's not fair to taxpayers. If you were to go look at two structures built, one by merit shop, one by project labor agreement, and you look at them, you probably can't determine the difference. But when you start looking at the numbers, one probably costs, you know, if one's 11 million, then the other one's probably 8 million, and you go, well, what's the difference?
Yeah.
The difference is that project labor agreement. And so not only is it more expensive, and we can dive into the arguments about, you know, both sides at some point. Not only is it more expensive, but we have to call a spade here. That money gets recycled to people like Sherrod Brown, Joe Biden, and it literally supports progressive candidates that support the union. It's kind of like this self-affirming ATM, and at the taxpayer expense. And oh, by the way, let's not forget about the fact that these union pensions are completely underfunded, and taxpayers are also bailing out these mismanaged
So it's a double
pensions.
whammy. You get to bail out the pensions. 90 billion is what taxpayers bailed out under Biden in the underfunded pensions. And then you get to pay more for project labor agreements.
And then you get people like Sherrod Brown who stand up and go, look, I saved your pension. No, Sherrod, you took my tax dollars.
I saved it.
And you paid more for that public works project, and then you ponied up more of my money to pay for the mismanaged pension.
Union Hustle is the documentary series we did on that, and you were in that. And I think that is almost like a nice little economics class on the trades of construction and how just regular, ordinary people get screwed. So we'll see what happens. The last thing I want to mention about that was that how a lot of these, not a lot, but quite a few of these organized labor movements, especially like IBEW, that's the Electricians, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, have become so ideologically driven that they're actually funding things like pro-Palestinian marches. UAW is on those marches as well. They funded projects at the protest at Columbia University. You look at Berkeley and there's a UAW sign. I mean, there's more going on here than representing labor. And I think that got exposed when we were doing the work, that just, it was really shocking because we would do the reviews and people in the business would go, what does the pro-Palestinian movement have to do with wiring a building? You know, I mean, people were starting to wonder, why is that money going to political causes, especially extreme.
And not only, private sector unions, but also public unions.
Yes.
Why does the American Federation of Teachers care about radical abortion amendments in the state of Ohio? Why does the American Federation of Teachers, National Education Association, Ohio Education Association, why do they care about who redistricts and who creates the maps? They have become so in the tank for political activism. At some point, the cord has to be cut.
Look right now, I saw this headline, and I'm going to get more and more on it, but as the transition starts to begin, and you start to hear more from Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, I did see where the government workers are getting union leaders at the AFGE, is what their government union is. They're trying to get them to renegotiate their collective bargaining agreements before January 20th.
Of course.
And I didn't realize this because the majority of them are not working 5 days a week. They are working from home still.
Of course.
Is that incredible?
It is
not
incredible.
Going to work. They're still 4 years after COVID working from home.
Let me throw this line in the water real quick, and we'll fish from it, this show and others in the future. There's this thing called the Presidential Reorganization Authority. And, under Article 1, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution, Congress has all legislative powers, but with 9 different presidents dating back to FDR, a president has been given this temporary opportunity to divide, consolidate, abolish certain agencies. And it's going to be very interesting to see how much leeway Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk have. But I got to tell you, the public sentiment is right now, you're operating at you have $35 trillion of debt. You're operating at a $2 trillion deficit every year. No mas. And so I'm really curious to see how aggressive they are and how much permission they get.
You could almost make it a national security issue that
100%.
we cannot be a sovereign, secure state by having that much debt. In his book, Woke Inc., Vivek Ramaswamy explained the issue, what he called the managerial class, which really is the bureaucracy.
Yep.
The bureaucracy almost has become, you know, a section of government that there's a controlling entity, a power. And a side note, the Pentagon just failed their 7th audit in a row, and they cannot account for $824 billion. The Pentagon issued a statement that they hope to be able to pass an audit by 2028. That probably makes people like Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk just go, oh, yeah, well, we're going to speed that up a little.
And they have to.
Think
Joe,
about
imagine.
that. Think about that, though. $824 billion unaccounted for dollars.
Well, you know, and kudos to U.S. Senator JD Vance, now Vice President-elect, who was able to point out that there was no proper accounting for the millions and millions and millions and billions of dollars that we sent over to Ukraine. And you look at that, Joe, if you and I were unable to reconcile our tax returns for 8 years, we couldn't look at the IRS and go, hey, we'll get it right in the next 3 or 4 years. This is absolutely absurd. This is the part that I, and I think everybody watching this, is dead dog tired of. If you can't get your act together, then we're going to cut you to the level that it's real simple, right? Money in, money out. And if you don't have enough money in, you can't put it out.
And it does come back to redefining, you can't spend money you don't have, and to understand who works for whom.
That's right.
The government does not owe these people a job. You have to work for the people, and I think that's the message that is interesting. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that's never really going to be fixed until we fix this IRS problem. You know, American jurisprudence is based on innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
The IRS, you're guilty until proven innocent, and that needs to be reversed.
And they did just hire 80,000 new agents, which I wonder what's going to happen. Maybe they'll reassign them to like the border agents or something like that.
They should.
Last thing before we take off today, I want to ask you about a story you did in Ohio. A high school principal from a district north of Columbus called Olentangy Orange. Could you kind of give us the, because I want to highlight this because I've seen a bunch of these stories, but this is one that's close to home and one you reported on.
Yeah. So we've done record requests. We're still doing record requests, and everything that we've reported is based on what we've been able to capture that's authenticated. And what we've been able to capture is that there's a principal at Olentangy Orange High School, and it would have been November 10th, so 5 full days after the election, wrote a piece in a newsletter that went out to staff there at Orange High School, really crying about the election and the fact that Trump won. And it turned extremely bizarre when she started comparing the time that we were into Buffalo heading toward a storm. And she compared Trump's victory to a storm. And then she started comparing herself and others with her political ideological bent to the people that were going to take the students to the storm and through the storm to the light. And
like Moses.
Like Moses. But the interesting part is, I heard from community members, I heard from staff members at Orange who wanted to remain anonymous for reasons that are clearly obvious.
I actually got a call too.
You got one?
Yeah, I actually did.
Well, I'm interested. What I heard was, not only was it inappropriate, and by the way, fast forward, this teacher was put on leave for 2 full days.
It's principal, right?
Principal. 2 full days.
This is the school leader.
2 full days was put on leave Thursday might have been Thursday, Friday, Monday. I think so. 2 to 3 days. Was reinstated. Actually had a meeting this morning at 7:30, my understanding, but was put on leave. And the superintendent came out yesterday and said, yes, she violated policy. She violated, and he didn't say this, but I can say it because I saw the email that he put out to staff members in Olentangy Local School District in September that said, neutrality, this is going to be a very volatile time. Do not cross the line. You cannot promote your position type of thing. She did it anyway. But she is now back in school as the principal of Olentangy Orange High School. But what I heard, and what I'm curious if you heard the same thing, I heard from students, I heard from workers on the staff there at Orange High School who said, to me, this amounts to hostility. I don't care if she apologizes, because the attitude, the belief system, the feeling that went into what she wrote, it's all over the place here. And if you're a conservative, if you voted for Trump, there's just this feeling that you either go along to get along or else.
Her message is, I don't have to follow the rules, everybody else does, because this is bigger than the rules. What she doesn't realize is kind of how we started the show. She's in a minority, and she's in an ideological world right now that a lot of people are going, I don't have any time for you anymore. I also know that a lot of these ONT&G school board meetings have been very contentious.
Oh, and they're about to get more contentious, as they should.
There's a fair amount of conservative people in that area.
Delaware County, I've got to check the numbers. Please don't hold me to this because it probably is wrong. But I think Delaware County was 6 or 7 points pro-Trump. In that district alone, it was a smaller margin, but still Trump had the majority of votes. So you're not in the minority. And you know what was really interesting, and this is the issue that we have to deal with. And by the way, I don't think that you come against Monica Asher, who's the principal there, individually and put all the blame on her. But when you read her letter, the hubris at the beginning of her letter is just so untenable. I mean, she talks about, well, I knew that I was always born to be a leader and it's just, she's so elite. So elite. She knows, you don't. But what has to happen, Joe, is parents in that district have to go to the board and they have to replace the board. Because the people who hire the Monica Ashers of the world are the people who need to be replaced at the ballot box.
And that's going to take people. When we talk to people at Merit Chops, and we talk, you need to, you work in a situation where you work for a company that are driven by free markets and all of that. That's critical. But when we talk to the workers, apprentices, supervisors, and we tell them, you also need to take responsibility for knowing who your mayor is, who's on your school board, who is your state rep, because those are people that have so much effect on you and your family that you need to know who to hold accountable, that it isn't just this leapfrog to the presidency, but you can do more to help you and your family by simply being aware of who those people are that have direct control. One last thing before we go, it is a National Apprentice Week, and this is an important week because it is apprentices in the trades and construction and things like that. This is a celebration of them. I spoke to the president of one of the independent electrical contractor chapters that teach apprentices. They bring them in, it's part of their trade schools. And he said that this year they've noticed an incredible increase in the numbers, but he said the types of kids he's seen, young people, young men and women coming in, are the ones that you, a few years ago, found on college campuses. So there's a real significant shift. He said you can see if people going, I don't think I'm going that route anymore. Now, the good news is you can make 6 figures in there before you're 30, when you get into some of these trades because you are in demand. But 100%. It is a shift. So congratulations that our apprentice, Isabella, has been working this week, and we'll have a lot of the highlights of some of the things going on at one of the independent electrical contractor schools, trade schools, locations, chapters, and be anxious to see what she comes up there. So anything else we need to watch coming up in the week? We're not going to know. I mean, Thanksgiving's next week. We'll do a remote next week, just so you know. But heading into the holiday, anything else we should watch besides maybe Monica Asher or?
I think keeping your eye on, and I think Grab Your Gear Network did a great job of listing all of the nods that Trump has given to certain people that he wants to appoint. Some of those will need to be approved by the U.S. Senate. That's an important list, but make no mistake about it, he's ready to sprint out of the gate. The other thing, for those folks in Ohio, I'll just tease you with this. The Ohio Republican House Caucus will meet tomorrow, and they're going to vote on the next Speaker of the Ohio House. And that's important because the Speaker of the House is the person that, as it stands, is responsible for making sure that priority legislation gets through the House. Republicans have a supermajority in Ohio's General Assembly, so there's really no excuse
so
this
before
time.
We go, who's running for who are the players?
Yeah, so right now, Matt Huffman is president of the Senate. He terms out there, and he ran for election to the State House. He won, so now he's a representative-elect. He will be, he really is the guy that everyone thought would win. He was going to battle the current Speaker, Jason Stevens. Stevens announced yesterday he's not running. And so now there's a guy by the name of Tim Barhorst out of Fort Laramie who is running.
Fort Laramie is where?
I'm going to say out like western, kind of close southwestern Ohio. I call it God's country out there.
Southwestern Ohio.
Yeah,
okay.
Very conservative, very red meat. And so Tim will actually be on my radio show today. I have a lot of questions for him. What Republicans are really looking at and what they're going to be cautious about is last time they voted on a speaker in their caucus, that speaker went out to the floor and he was undermined by another person by the name of Jason Stevens, who partnered with the entire Democratic caucus to win the speakership, and that cost Ohio dearly with respect to keeping it easy to amend our Constitution and keeping conservative
They paid
legislation.
for that. State paid for that, didn't they?
Oh, it was insane. There is so much more that could have been done on education choice, on tax reform, on protecting our Constitution from progressive initiatives, and Jason Stevens failed.
Okay.
But he's gone. And so now the next leader is the person that's going to have to carry that banner forward.
This is a situation that's happening in state houses across the country,
Yes.
too, because, again, your state has a lot of power.
Tons of power.
You need to watch what's going on there.
Yep.
Do you have an idea who's going to win that? You're going to put your money on
You know,
anybody?
if I were a betting man, and I am not, I would go with Matt Huffman. Matt Huffman has raised a few $1 million. Matt Huffman is pretty politically savvy. What I worry
It's
about...
Jim Jordan's district, just so people understand.
Jim Jordan's
Yep.
district. Jim Jordan has endorsed him. Warren Davidson, a member of the Freedom Caucus on Capitol Hill, has endorsed him. What gives me heartburn, and I'll throw this out here, is I just wonder if somebody's rolling marbles on the floor under Matt Huffman's feet. If Matt Huffman wins the Republican caucus vote on Wednesday, is there a guarantee that the Republicans show up in January and vote for him on the floor? That's what's supposed to happen, but that's not what happened when Jason Stevens won. And there's a lot of concern that there are these lobbying firms, there are utilities that are really maybe supporting somebody else. Maybe it's Tim Barhorst, maybe it's somebody else, and they're going to try to undermine conservative Republican leadership again.
Politics is messy, but we'll try to clean it up. Hey, until, just so we know, next week is Thanksgiving. We'll, of course, still have a show on Tuesday. In the meantime, as you head into your week, have a great week. And Jack, thank you. Of course, check out Jack on his show, The Windsor Report, which is on 98.9 The Answer in Columbus, Ohio. It's also a podcast, which you can get literally anywhere you can get your podcasts. And also check out the Ohio Press Network. We do work with the Ohio Press Network here at Grab Your Gear because it's the one place we believe still does journalism, which is important to your who, what, where, when, why, and how world. So until next week, I'm Joe for Jack, for Apprentice Isabella. We'll see you next week back here on Grab Your Gear.